we'll live together for you. As I was preparing to move into the home I purchased under my name, my mother-in-law, who suddenly showed up at our house, blurted out something outrageous. I had endured endless harassment from her, and whenever I visited my in-laws' home, I was worked to the bone like a draft horse. Although my father-in-law did nothing, he never stopped her and seemed to be riding along. It was likely that she would plan to live with us and exploit me. Thinking I wouldn't let this happen, I shared a shocking fact with my in-laws. What? I'm single, you know? What? My in-laws, flustered by the revelation that I was single, continued to badmouth me. Witnessing all this, a certain person became even more furious than before. I am Vanessa, 33 years old, working as a regular employee at a major company. My husband, Justin, works at the same company, and we have been married for 2 years. We met at a company drinking party, and it seems he fell in love with me at first sight. Justin asked around at the company intensely to find out which department I was in and approached me aggressively. Initially, I wondered what kind of person he was. But seeing him come to see me daily and inviting me out for meals made me feel assured and possibly happy to be with someone who pursued me so persistently, so I accepted his feelings. After about 2 years of dating, we got married. We seemed to have started a happy married life. Life with Justin was going very smoothly. Working at the same company made it easy to coordinate schedules and share household chores. And we could even go on trips far away when we dated. I really think it was good for me to have married him. Except for one thing. That is, his parents. When I went to greet them before our marriage, they seemed very kind and welcoming. I thought I could build a good relationship with them. However, they turned out to be terrible people. It happened a while after we got married. It was a day when my husband and I both coincidentally had a day off. And we were planning to relax at home. Ding dong. Who could that be? We had no plans for visitors that day, nor were we expecting any packages. So I wondered who it could be when my husband said, "I'll go see," and headed to the entrance as if he knew who it was. Oh, for an apartment, this is spacious. But there are so many steps. It's tough with bad legs. Oh dear, Vanessa, even if it's your day off, wearing a tracksuit like that is sloppy. Don't show my son such an embarrassing sight. My in-laws entered the living room with my husband. They sat down heavily on the sofa without saying anything. As you can see, they kept making snide remarks to me, acting as if it was natural for them to be respected. Their attitude was the worst. My father-in-law did not directly cause harm, but he seemed to be going along with his wife. Hey, why did you call them on our day off? We were supposed to relax, just the two of us. Sorry. Mom insisted so much I couldn't say no. That's fine, but why didn't you tell me? I had received various harassments from my mother-in-law before. I had consulted with my husband each time. So he knew that I was not getting along well with my in-laws. However, maybe because he felt obliged to be filial as an only child, he rarely admonished them. Really, can't modern daughters-in-law even serve a cup of coffee? While my husband and I were whispering, she loudly implied that I should serve coffee. Even though they came unexpectedly and I was bewildered, they really were shameless people. Excuse me, I'll prepare it right away. You should have prepared this before we arrived, you know. Ignoring her sarcasm, I hurriedly started preparing coffee in the kitchen. They stayed at my home until the evening. As a result, I ended up having to prepare lunch for them as well. Our day off was ruined, but this was just one of many unpleasant episodes regarding my in-laws. One day. Hey, Vanessa. What? Mom's planning to have a tea party next weekend with some neighbors and relatives. And she wants us to come too. Honestly, I didn't want to go. It was clear that if I went, I would be made to help out and be exploited. However, I knew I would be criticized later if I didn't go. I thought it would be better to help out than to be criticized, and reluctantly agreed to participate. It would have been better if my husband had just refused, but I knew it was futile to say anything. On the day of the tea party, we were called in earlier than the start time. Hello. You're late. It's common sense to come 20 minutes earlier. Come on, Mom, the roads were busy. Give her a break. Well, all right. Take it easy, Justin. Now, Vanessa, hurry up and get started. While my husband was treated gently, my mother-in-law was very harsh on me. As I had predicted, I ended up preparing all the snacks for the tea party by myself. I was used to cooking, so it wasn't that I couldn't make them. But the number she demanded was so unreasonable that it took a long time. During this, my mother-in-law did nothing but watch TV the whole time. Mother, I've finished making the snacks. Really, Vanessa, you're hopeless. What? It's just making some sweets, yet it's taking so long. Too slow. Despite never having properly made sweets herself, she had the nerve to make such a snide remark. I actually finished making them quite quickly considering the excessive amount she requested. But she never said thank you. It's clear she intentionally asked for more just to harass me. Meanwhile, my husband, Justin, and my father-in-law were preparing cushions and chairs for the guests. But of course they did not help me. I ignored various other snide remarks made during the preparations. Because if I paid attention to every single one, I couldn't cope. Then, the tea party started. Mother-in-law's friends and relatives gathered in droves. For me, this time was hell. When guests complimented the sweets, saying they were delicious, my mother-in-law boasted as if she had made them herself. I made these. I was a bit unsure, but I'm so glad you like them. Despite not having helped at all, she took the credit. When the conversation among her relatives turned to their daughters-in-law, she said, "Your daughter-in-law is such a good person, isn't she? Mine is awful, treats me like a slave." That was completely untrue. It was incredibly uncomfortable for me. After the tea party, as expected, I was made to clean up and was even told, "While you're at it, clean the room too." I was treated like a maid. Holding back tears, I thought, I will never attend another tea party called by her. However, life is not that easy. The hellish tea party turned out to be quite popular among the others, and was set to become a regular event. Apparently, my sweets had received many compliments. "Vanessa, we are having another tea party next weekend, so I'm counting on you." What? Wait, please. I have work that day. You can take the day off. Are you trying to embarrass me? If you don't come, I'll make sure my son and you get divorced. She called me suddenly to demand I attend the tea party, and showed no mercy even though I said I had work. At that time, I didn't have the courage to defy my mother-in-law, and was afraid she might actually force my husband and me to divorce. So I took off work to comply with her demands. Consequently, I ended up being exploited like a draft horse at the tea party, and I had to take time off work frequently to assist, which made me feel uncomfortable at my job. My mental state was already beyond its limits. Even when I consulted with my husband, he never really helped me, just saying, "Well, Mom doesn't mean any harm, try to be more forgiving." Before long, I was constantly thinking about how I could escape this painful life. The solution I came to was, let's get a divorce. What? It was to divorce my husband. I struggled a lot with the decision. Although I felt distrustful because he didn't help me, I still loved him. However, I didn't want to continue a life tormented by my in-laws, mostly my mother-in-law. If we divorced, my husband and I would become practically strangers. So I wouldn't need to deal with his parents anymore. The issue was whether my husband would agree to the divorce. No, I don't want a divorce. What's gotten into you all of a sudden? I just don't want to deal with your mother anymore. You know what our relationship is like, right? I know, but divorce? I love you, Vanessa, and I want to be with you forever. I feel the same way. But I can't take it anymore. So, let's divorce formally and live separately, but we can keep in touch and continue our relationship. How about that? Reluctantly, my husband agreed. Thus, we ended up divorcing due to my mother-in-law's malicious behavior. Life after the divorce was truly comfortable. The fact that I had submitted the divorce papers gave me a push. And I changed my mobile phone model and number. So I no longer received annoying calls from my mother-in-law. I lived in a different apartment from the one where my husband remained. And since then, my in-laws stopped visiting unexpectedly. I was living a comfortable life without them, but something was still missing. It was my married life with my husband. Although we divorced, we both still loved each other, and I wasn't satisfied living separately. So, I came up with a plan. It was risky and could result in significant losses, but I decided to go for it. As a preliminary step, I immersed myself in work like never before. Before the divorce, I often had to miss work due to those hellish tea parties. But after explaining the situation to my colleagues and committing myself again, I regained their trust. And finally, I've saved enough. I had managed to save as much as $500,000. Saving money had been my hobby since university, and my dream was to buy my own home. After years of diligent saving, I had finally reached my goal of $500,000. With this amount, I could buy a somewhat fancy house. I immediately contacted my husband to discuss buying a home. A home? But buying a house costs a lot of money. Where will you get it? Don't worry about that. I've saved up enough. How about we go see some model homes on our next day off? Thus, we set a date to visit model homes. He was surprised but grateful that I had saved so much money. And I felt glad that I had worked so hard to save. By the way, let's not tell your parents about buying a house just yet. I'll let them know when the time is right. Got it. If we tell them now, who knows what they'll do. In this way, while confirming that we still had feelings for reconciliation, we steadily proceeded with the preparations for our home. After a while, as my husband and I visited various model homes, we imagined our future home together, considering details. It would be helpful to have a socket here. I'd like the kitchen layout to be like this. Also, I want the kitchen to be visible from the living room. We also considered having children in the future, so we took that into account too. And finally, the blueprint was completed and the construction began. I made sure the costs stayed within $500,000 after consulting with the contractor. So everything was perfectly arranged. Our house will be built here. It's exciting, isn't it? So, about the plan I mentioned earlier, have you made up your mind? For us to live happily together in our new home. It was absolutely necessary that my in-laws would not interfere. I had told him that he needed to either convince his parents to stay away or cut ties with them completely. Sorry, I still haven't made up my mind. I'm an only child. And although I understand that mom has done some terrible things to you, Vanessa, I owe them for raising me, and I'm worried about what will happen if I'm gone. While I couldn't forgive his parents, I understood his feelings. Well, it's up to you what to do. I bought this house in my name. And we're divorced, so you don't have to force yourself to come here. Now it was up to him to make his decision. We parted ways that day. Since the house would take some time to build, I worked hard at my job and slowly prepared for the move. No matter what choice my husband made, I was ready to cut my in-laws off completely. Either way, my plan seemed likely to work. After finishing work that day, I continued with the moving preparations. Then, I received a message on my smartphone. It was from my husband. Well done. Seeing the message from him, I smiled slyly. It looked like we were on track for the best possible future. After some time, our dream home was completed. The house turned out just as I had hoped, and I was very pleased with it. Seeing the completed home, I realized once again what a major purchase I had made. But just because the house was finished, it didn't mean I was satisfied. The real battle was just beginning. Since I had been preparing to move before the house was completed, I had the movers smoothly transfer all my belongings to the new home. After moving, I went to the apartment where my husband was now living alone. Sitting at the dining table in the living room, I heard noises from the entrance. Finally, the day had come. My husband had brought his parents. It's been a while since I've been here. Why haven't you invited us over sooner? Young people these days don't understand manners at all. As usual, my in-laws came into the living room complaining. And upon seeing me, Vanessa, I heard you were on a long business trip, but here you are. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I'm sorry about that. I just returned yesterday and have been too busy to get in touch. Of course, I had never been on a business trip. I had lied to them about it just for this day. Well, that's all right. More importantly, you bought a house, right? And you spent quite a bit of money on it. It sounds spacious enough, and will live together for you. As expected, my mother-in-law was hooked by the news of the house purchase. She quite arrogantly offered to live with us. But it was clear from her past behavior that she only wanted to exploit me. Indeed, it would be more reassuring for us to live together. That's why you built the house, right? I almost burst out laughing at his comment. Hearing this, my husband silently observed the situation. Can you sit down for now and talk about it in detail? As my in-laws sat down, I served them coffee. Oh, you're being unusually thoughtful, she commented as she took a sip of the coffee. Being polite to them was going to end today. Now, about this new house I bought. Yes. You bought it for us, right? I'm looking forward to living with Justin and you, Vanessa. What? I'm single, though. What? In fact, I had not told them that we were divorced. To escape my mother-in-law's unreasonable demands, I had lied about being on a long business trip. As I revealed that I was single, they shouted, turning red with anger. What do you mean you're single? Vanessa, you're married to Justin. What nonsense are you talking? Are you making fun of old people? Exactly as I said. Justin and I are divorced, so I'm single. I bought the new house in my name, so you can't live there. I have the right to decide who lives in the new house. Divorced. I didn't hear about this. I thought it was strange. Suddenly going on a long business trip. You were lying. Because of you, I was embarrassed. Don't do whatever you want just because you married into this family. Take responsibility. So you betrayed not only us but also Justin. What a person. It's good that you divorced. As I firmly stated they couldn't live there, my in-laws bombarded me with complaints and sarcasm. Then, having listened to all this, my husband finally snapped. Enough. Just stop it. All you ever do is complain about Vanessa, and I've had enough. Perhaps they never expected their own son to explode like this, and they fell silent. It's because of you that we ended up divorcing. How can you say something so terrible? I was thinking of Vanessa. Thinking of Vanessa? After all the complaints and sarcastic comments, and forcing her to participate in those ridiculous tea parties, making her feel miserable like a slave. How is that thinking of her? Vanessa is not some convenient servant for you. She was my precious wife. And yet, because of you, our life together was ruined. Don't interfere with our relationship anymore. Justin. On the day I was preparing to move, the message from him had read, "I'm really sorry for everything. I've decided to cut ties with my parents. I had thought he didn't really love me since he never helped me before. But hearing his true feelings now made me tear up. Since I'm an only child, I thought you would be in trouble without me. And I owe you for raising me, so I didn't say anything until now. But I've reached my limit. I'm cutting ties with you. Please don't come near Vanessa and me ever again. How could you? Is that how you treat your parents? People who hurt their son's precious wife don't deserve to call themselves parents." That's what my husband declared. Don't say such things. From now on, I'll try to build a good relationship with Vanessa, okay? I couldn't trust her words at all. After hearing what Justin has said, you still say that? Well, would you like to hear this? I opened the voice memo app on my smartphone and played a certain recording. It contained many of the snide comments she had made to me over time. There were only a few, but some were from my father-in-law as well. Hearing this, my in-laws' faces turned pale rapidly. If you try to approach us again, I will take this to a lawyer. That's right, so please leave now. By the way, I'm canceling this apartment lease. So it's pointless to come here unexpectedly anymore. With that, my in-laws walked away dejectedly. This marked the end of the long battle with them. Afterward, my husband began preparing to move and eventually moved into our new home. As for my in-laws, it seems the neighbors and relatives came to know of this incident. And they started to be scorned. I wondered how it had leaked, but it turned out to be my husband who had spread the word. To ensure that my in-laws wouldn't get carried away again. He had explained what happened to the people who attended the tea parties and set things straight. I hadn't thought that far ahead, so I almost wanted to applaud my husband for his smart play. As for me, I reconciled with my husband and we resubmitted our marriage registration at the city hall. Successfully returning to being a married couple. My plan worked exactly as I had hoped. Thanks to that, we can now live leisurely in our carefully chosen new home. It was a risky and expensive purchase. But I'm truly glad we bought it because we can live as a couple again. And then. No way. What's wrong? Look at this. What? This is. Incredibly, I was expecting a child. The future of living as a family of 3 in this house isn't far off. Though things will get tougher. I hope to use my in-laws as a negative example and strive to be good parents for our child.
The rusted lock gave way with a sharp tug, the heavy iron door creaking open to reveal a dimly lit space within the decrepit shed. As my eyes adjusted, a faint whimper reached my ears, the unmistakable sound of a child's muffled cries. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is someone there?" Silence. Steeling my nerves, I stepped inside, the musty air assaulting my senses. Rays of sunlight streamed through cracks in the walls, illuminating a small, huddled figure in the corner. I gasped, covering my mouth to stifle the cry that threatened to escape. It was a young girl, her frail body curled into a tight ball, stringy blonde hair obscuring her face. At the sound of my footsteps, she froze, her cries turning to ragged breaths. "It's okay. I won't hurt you," I said, my words gentle yet firm. "My name is Evelyn. I'm here to help." Slowly, she lifted her head, and our eyes met. Piercing blue orbs, haunted yet defiant, stared back at me, the gaze of one far older than her years. A surge of recognition washed over me, coupled with disbelief and horror. "Eliza?" I whispered, the name I never thought I'd utter again. "Eliza Carson?" Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her delicate features. Of course, she wouldn't recognize me. We'd never met. Eliza Carson was Clayton's cousin, presumed dead after a boating accident 6 years ago when she was only 6 years old. Her body was never recovered, but the entire community mourned her loss. "How do you know my name?" Her small voice quivered, laced with equal parts fear and desperation. "Eliza, it's me, Evelyn. I'm married to your cousin Clayton." I inched closer, my hands raised in a placating gesture. "You're safe now, I promise. I'll get you out of here." Her eyes widened, realization dawning. "You have to go," she pleaded, shrinking back. "If he finds out, you know—" The shed's entrance slammed open, the force sending a tremor through the floorboards. I whirled around to find Clayton, his expression a mix of shock and trepidation. "Evelyn?" His gaze flickered between us, confusion rapidly giving way to panic. "What are you doing here? Get away from her!" I stood my ground, shielding Eliza with my body. "Clayton, what is going on? Why is your cousin, who everyone thought was dead, locked up in this shed?" His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "You don't understand. It's not what it looks like." "Then explain it to me," I demanded, my voice rising. "Because right now it looks like your family has been lying and keeping a little girl prisoner for God knows how long." Eliza flinched at my outburst, and I softened my tone. "Please, Clayton, she's just a child. Whatever this is about, we need to get her out of here and to safety." Clayton's shoulders slumped, defeated. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words died on his lips as a booming voice echoed from outside. "What in the blazes is going on here?" My blood turned to ice as Terrence Carson, Clayton's uncle, and the family patriarch appeared in the doorway, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over us all. Terrence's eyes narrowed as they settled on Eliza's frail form cowering behind me. A cruel sneer twisted his weathered features. Well, seems the little brat has been discovered." He spat the words like venom. "Didn't think you'd last this long, girl." I tensed, shielding Eliza further from his menacing glare. "What is the meaning of this, Terrence? Why have you been keeping a child locked up like some animal?" He scoffed, unfazed by my accusation. "That's none of your concern, Missy. You've stuck your nose where it don't belong." "Like hell it's not my concern," I shot back, fury rising within me. "This is my family, too, and I have a right to know what kind of depravity you've been up to." Terrence advanced, his bulky frame towering over me. "You watch your tone, girl. This is my land, my family. What I do here is my business." Clayton stepped between us, his arms extended. "Uncle Terrence, please. There's no need for this. Let's just take a breath and—" "And what, boy?" Terrence snarled, rounding on his nephew. "You gonna take her side over your own blood, after everything I've done for this family?" Clayton faltered, his eyes flitting between us, torn. Seizing the opportunity, I pressed on. "Clayton, look at me. You know this is wrong. Whatever your uncle's reasons, keeping a child prisoner is unforgivable. We have to get Eliza out of here and to the authorities." Terrence barked a harsh laugh. "The authorities? You think that sheriff buddy of yours will lift a finger against me? I own half this goddamn town, girl. No one's gonna believe the ramblings of some outsider over the word of a Carson." His words chilled me to the bone, but I refused to back down. "We'll see about that. I'm not afraid of you, Terrence. Not anymore." With a surprising burst of strength, I grabbed Eliza's hand and pulled her towards the exit. Terrence made a move to stop us, but Clayton held him back, his expression pained but resolute. As we burst out into the open air, I heard Terrence's roar of fury echoing behind us. "This ain't over, you hear me? You're gonna regret this, Evelyn Carson. I'll make sure of it." We ran, putting as much distance between us in that wretched place as possible. Eliza's small hand trembled in mine, but she didn't slow, her resilience evident despite her ordeal. Finally, we reached the safety of town, and I ushered her into the back of my truck, out of sight. Her wide, haunted eyes met mine, brimming with a mixture of fear and hope. What happens now?" she whispered, her voice small, but laced with steel. I cupped her face gently, determination blazing within me. "Now, we fight back. We're going to expose what Terrence has done, and make sure he can never hurt anyone again." A faint smile tugged at her cracked lips, and she nodded, the first spark of life I'd seen in her since our fateful encounter. As I gunned the engine, peeling out of the sleepy town that harbored such horrors, I knew there was no turning back. Terrence had made it personal, and I would stop at nothing to bring him to justice, both for Eliza's sake and my own. The game was afoot. and I would see this through to the bitter end, no matter what stood in my way. Terrence's reign of terror was about to come crashing down, and God help anyone who tried to stop me. My truck rumbled to a stop outside the sheriff's station, the engine still growling angrily as I killed the ignition. Eliza peered out the window, her small frame tense with apprehension. "It's okay," I said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Marcus is a good man. He'll help us." She nodded mutely, chewing her lip as we exited the vehicle. The station's double doors swung open, and Marcus himself strode out, a concerned crease etched into his brow. "Evelyn, what's going on?" His gaze landed on Eliza, and his eyes widened. "Is that—" "It's a long story," I replied grimly. "We need to talk, in private." Understanding flashed across his features as he ushered us inside, his demeanor all business. Once sequestered in his office, I wasted no time recounting the harrowing events of the day, from discovering Eliza's confinement to Terrence's menacing threats. Marcus listened intently, his expression darkening with every detail. When I finished, he let out a low whistle, scrubbing a hand over his weathered face. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "I knew Terrence Carson was a piece of work, but this—" He shook his head, disgust etched into his features. "You believe me, then?" I pressed. "You'll help us bring him down?" "Of course I believe you, Evelyn." He reached across his desk, clasping my hand firmly. "You know I've always had your back. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that bastard gets what's coming to him." Relief washed over me at his words, but it was short-lived as another thought occurred to me. What about Eliza's safety? Terrence won't stop until he gets her back under his control. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Leave that to me. I'll set you both up somewhere secure, out of town where he can't get to you." "No." The vehement protest came not from me, but from Eliza herself. We both turned to her, startled by the sudden outburst from the normally timid girl. "I'm not running anymore," she declared, her eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't yet seen. "That monster has kept me locked up, afraid of my own shadow for too long. I want to face him, to make him pay for what he's done." My admiration for her bravery was tempered by concern. "Eliza, I understand how you feel, but nothing," she cut me off fiercely. "I may be just a kid, but I'm stronger than he thinks. You said we were going to fight back, and that's what I want to do." I opened my mouth to protest further, but Marcus held up a hand, silencing me. "She's right, Evelyn." His expression was grim, but resolute. "If we want to take Terrence down for good, we'll need Eliza's testimony. She's the key to exposing his crimes and making sure he can't wriggle his way out of this." Eliza lifted her chin defiantly, her jaw set in determination far beyond her years. In that moment, I saw not a frightened child, but a young woman forged in the fires of unimaginable hardship, a kindred spirit with an inner strength to match my own. With a slow nod of acceptance, I turned back to Marcus. "All right, what's our next move?" A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "First, we need to gather more evidence against Terrence, something concrete to back up Eliza's story. And for that—" He paused, his gaze flickering towards the door. "We'll need to bring in some extra firepower." As if on cue, there was a sharp rap at the office door. Marcus's smile widened as he called out, "Come on in, Nina. We've got work to do." Nina Carson swept into the room like a whirlwind, her sharp features pinched with an expression somewhere between apprehension and distaste. Her piercing gaze settled on me, then Eliza, before flicking back to Marcus. "You weren't kidding," she muttered. "The kid's alive." I bristled at her dismissive tone, but Marcus held up a placating hand. "Nina, you know why I called you here. We need your help taking down your father once and for all." A flicker of emotion passed over her face, a mixture of anger and hurt so fleeting I almost missed it. With a curt nod, she seemed to steel herself, smoothing her features into an impassive mask. "Fine. What do you need from me?" As Marcus laid out the situation, Nina listened stonily, her jaw clenched tight. When he finished, she let out a harsh bark of laughter, shaking her head in disbelief. "Typical Dad," she spat. "Lying, manipulating, doing whatever it takes to maintain his twisted idea of control." Her gaze landed on Eliza, softening ever so slightly. "I'm sorry, kid. You didn't deserve to get caught up in his sick games." Eliza met her stare evenly, her small frame radiating a strength that belied her years. "It's not your fault," she replied, her voice steady. "You're not the one who kept me locked up like an animal for 6 years." An uncomfortable silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken tensions and histories I could only guess at. Finally, Nina broke it with a weary sigh. "You're right. This is on him, not me. Not anymore." Her jaw set in grim determination. "I'll help however I can to take the bastard down. No more lies, no more protecting him. It's time he paid for his crimes." "That's what I like to hear." Marcus clapped his hands together, all business once more. "First things first, we need to gather evidence, anything that can corroborate Eliza's story and prove Terrence was behind her disappearance." "I might be able to help with that," Nina offered, her voice taking on a harder edge. "Dad may be good at covering his tracks, but he's also arrogant as hell. Chances are he's left a trail, however faint, if we know where to look." A thin smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "Then it's a good thing we've got an insider on our side." Nina's lips curved into a matching expression, tinged with a bitterness that spoke volumes. "Believe me, I know all about the Carson family's dirty little secrets. Let's just say dear old Dad wasn't exactly Father of the Year material." As she delved into the sordid details, my anger towards Terrence Carson only intensified, both for Eliza's horrific mistreatment and the web of manipulation he'd spun around his own flesh and blood. This man's villainy knew no bounds, tainting everything and everyone he touched like a malignant blight. But not for much longer. With Marcus's tenacity, Eliza's bravery, and Nina's inside knowledge, we would unravel Terrence's schemes thread by thread until he had nowhere left to hide. Come hell or high water, he would face justice, both for his sake and mine. When Nina finished her grim recounting, I turned to Marcus, my expression hardening with resolve. "Where do we start?" The sheriff leaned back in his chair, a feral glint in his eye. "At the beginning, we're going to dig into every inch of Terrence's life, turn over every rock until we find the proof to bury that son of a bitch for good." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing grimly. "Whatever it takes." The Carson family estate loomed ahead, its wrought iron gates an imposing barrier guarding the secrets that lurked within. Nina gripped the steering wheel tightly as we approached, her knuckles white with tension. "You sure about this, Evelyn?" she asked, her voice tight. "There's no going back after we cross that line." I eyed the foreboding manor, feeling its dark presence like a weight pressing down on me. "I'm sure. It's time we got some answers, straight from the devil's mouth." Nina gave a grim nod before punching in the code, the gates grinding open with a piercing shriek of metal on metal. We pulled through, the tires crunching over the gravel drive as we neared the main house. Lorraine Carson was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. As we climbed out of the car, her pinched expression softened briefly at the sight of her daughter. "Nina, what are you doing here?" Her gaze landed on me, eyes narrowing to slits. "And you brought her? After everything that's happened?" "That's exactly why we're here, Mother," Nina replied coolly. "We know what Dad's been up to, about Eliza. It's over." Lorraine flinched as if struck, panic flitting across her features before being hastily masked by a stony facade. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Can it, Mom?" Nina snapped, her patience clearly waning. "The lying, the cover-ups, it all stops now. We're going to take that sick bastard down, and you're either with us or against us." A tense silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history and roiling emotions. Finally, Lorraine's shoulders sagged in defeat. "You always did have a way of cutting through the bullshit, Nina." She sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 53 years. "I suppose I can't keep denying it any longer." Gesturing for us to follow, she led the way inside, her measured steps echoing hollowly through the cavernous foyer. My gaze swept over the opulent trappings, gilded mirrors, priceless antiques, and not a single personal touch to be seen. Like a museum frozen in time, devoid of warmth or life. How fitting for the Carson family. Lorraine ushered us into a dimly lit study, the heavy drapes drawn against the dying sun outside. A glass of amber liquid sat untouched on the mahogany desk, a telltale sign of its occupant's recent presence. At our entrance, Terrence rose from the worn leather armchair, his expression thunderous. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" he growled, his eyes flicking between Nina and me with undisguised contempt. "I don't recall inviting you piranhas into my home." "Can it, Terrence?" Lorraine said, her voice low but laced with a surprising venom. "We're done with your lies, your deceptions. It's time we settled this, once and for all. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of unease passed over Terrence's craggy features. There and gone so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined it. Just as swiftly, the mask of arrogance slammed back into place, his lips curling into a contemptuous sneer. So the family betrayers have come to rally against me, have they? He shook his head with a mocking chuckle. You're welcome to try, but you'll find I'm not so easily cowed. We'll see about that, I bit out, barely containing my fury. We know what you did to Eliza, you twisted son of a bitch. Keeping a child locked up like an animal for your own sick gratification? That's a new low, even for you. His gaze locked with mine, cold and unflinching. You have no idea what you're talking about, girl. Everything I've done, everything, has been for the preservation and protection of this family's legacy. Terrence's words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, his twisted justification chilling me to the core. Before I could formulate a response, Nina stepped forward, her eyes blazing with barely contained rage. That's enough of your rationalizations, you sick fuck, she spat. We're done playing by your rules. Eliza is safe, the jig is up, and you're going to pay for what you've done. A muscle twitched in Terrence's jaw, the first crack in his impassive facade. You ungrateful little bitch, he snarled, his voice low and menacing. After everything I've sacrificed for this family, this is how you repay me? Sacrificed? Nina let out a harsh bark of laughter. Is that what you call systematically destroying us from the inside out? Alienating Mom? Driving me away with your toxic vitriol? Wake up, you delusional bastard. The only thing you've ever cared about is maintaining your twisted power trip. I could see the fury building in Terrence like a raging inferno, his body practically vibrating with the effort of restraining it. When he spoke again, his tone was soft, almost gentle. Nina, you have no idea the things I've had to do to preserve our legacy, the sacrifices, the difficult choices. His gaze bored into her, sharp as flint. You think I wanted to do what I did to Eliza, that I took pleasure in it? The air left my lungs in a shocked rush. Terrence's admission hung there, visceral and horrifying. Nina looked equally sickened, her skin taking on an ashen pallor. You monster, she choked out. How could you? How could I? Terrence roared, the floodgates finally bursting open. That sniveling brat was a liability, a blight on our family's good name. She had to be dealt with, made to disappear for the greater good. My hands curled into white-knuckled fists at my sides as a wave of revulsion crashed over me. This man's depravity knew no bounds, not even when it came to his own flesh and blood. So you admit it, I bit out through gritted teeth. You're the one who made Eliza disappear, then kept her locked up like a prisoner all these years. A cruel smile twisted Terrence's lips. Give the girl a prize. Yes, I orchestrated the whole thing. The boating accident, the fake investigation, all of it. And you want to know the real kicker? He leaned forward, his eyes glittering with perverse glee. Her own sniveling parents were in on it from the start. A startled gasp from Lorraine was the only sound in the deafening silence that followed. Nina looked utterly shell-shocked, her mouth working soundlessly as she struggled to process her father's horrific revelation. It was Marcus who finally broke the stillness, his voice hard as tempered steel. That's more than enough confession. With a deft movement, he had his sidearm leveled squarely at Terrence's chest, his expression utterly devoid of mercy. Terrence Carson, you're under arrest for the kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and endangerment of a minor. You have the right to remain silent. As Marcus recited the Miranda rights, cuffing the now ranting Terrence with practiced efficiency, I caught Nina's eye across the room. The anguish and betrayal etched on her features said it all, the last thread of family loyalty severed for good. No matter what came next, there would be no coming back from this day. Terrence's web of lies and manipulation had finally been laid bare, the depth of his evil exposed for all to see. My path was clear now, forged in the fires of this hard-won truth. By whatever means necessary, I would ensure Terrence faced the full weight of justice for his unspeakable crimes. If it was the last thing I did, he would pay. The courthouse was a madhouse, swarming with reporters and gawkers, desperate for a glimpse of the sordid drama about to unfold. I pushed my way through the throngs, Eliza's small hand clutched tightly in mine as we forged a path towards the imposing oak doors. "Just keep your head down," I murmured, shielding her from the flashing cameras and shouted questions. "It'll be over soon." She gave a tiny nod, her jaw set in a determined line far beyond her years. Despite her diminutive stature, she carried herself with a quiet strength that never failed to fill me with awe and a fierce protectiveness. No matter what, I would ensure Terrence Carson paid for what he'd done to this remarkable girl. The courtroom itself was mercifully hushed, the air thick with tension as we filed in alongside the prosecution. My gaze immediately found Terrence, seated ramrod straight at the defendant's table, his expression one of haughty disdain. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, a silent challenge passing between us. A cruel smirk curved his thin lips, sending an icy shiver down my spine. That twisted son of a bitch was up to something. I could feel it in my bones. As the proceedings got underway, I found my attention divided between the testimonies and Terrence's every-minute shift and reaction. He remained infuriatingly inscrutable, betraying none of the turmoil that must have been roiling beneath that impeccably composed facade. It wasn't until Eliza was called to the stand that the first hairline fractures began to show. She was so small up there, positively dwarfed by the imposing witness box. But when she lifted her head and fixed Terrence with those haunted blue eyes, there was an unshakable resolve blazing within them that defied her fragile stature. "Tell us, Miss Carson," the prosecutor prompted gently. "In your own words, what happened the night you disappeared 6 years ago?" A hushed stillness descended over the courtroom as Eliza drew a fortifying breath. When she spoke, her voice rang out clear and unwavering. "It was my uncle, Terrence. He took me from my parents' house late one night, told me we were going on a secret adventure." She recounted the harrowing tale in disturbing detail, the staged boating accident, the wrath hole in which she'd been imprisoned all these years, the mind games and emotional torment at Terrence's hands. With every new revelation, I could see the cracks in Terrence's composure deepening, his knuckles whitening around the arms of his chair. And he said I had to stay hidden, that no one could know I was alive, not even my own parents. Eliza's voice began to waver, but she pressed on with heart-rending bravery. He said it was for the good of the family. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the most hardened observers seemed shaken by the graphic injustice laid bare before them, all except Terrence. As Eliza was finally excused, his booming voice rang out, shattering the somber silence like a thunderclap. "You little lying bitch!" Before anyone could react, he'd surged to his feet, teeth bared in an animalistic snarl as he lunged towards the witness stand, and Eliza. A collective gasp went up from the gallery, but I was already in motion, hurling myself bodily between the raging monster and his target. His hands found my throat, cutting off my airway with bruising force as we crashed backwards. Black spots danced across my vision, but I clawed desperately at his vice-like grip, a primal surge of adrenaline propelling me. "Not this time, you bastard. Not her. Not my family." Distantly, I was aware of pandemonium erupting around us, shouting, scuffling, the distant wail of sirens. But all that existed in that moment was the furious pounding of my heart, the burning need for air, and Terrence's pitiless face looming over me, twisted in a sadistic leer of triumph. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure was gone. I sucked in a ragged gasp, blinking against the dark blot still obscuring my sight. When my vision finally cleared, I saw Terrence being swarmed by a sea of bodies, dragging his thrashing form away as he spewed vile curses and threats. Marcus was there, features set in a mask of cold fury as he slapped the cuffs back on the raving man's wrists. And in the eye of the storm's aftermath stood Eliza, gazing at me with those wise, haunted eyes, the eyes of one who had witnessed the true depths of human cruelty, yet emerged from the abyss unbowed. As our eyes met, a silent understanding passed between us. No matter what it took, we had won this day. Terrence Carson's reign of terror was over. The rain fell in a soft drizzle, misting the air with a gentle haze as I made my way down the familiar dirt path. Overhead, the iron-gray clouds parted enough to allow a few feeble rays of sunlight to pierce through, bathing the Carson family cemetery in a somber glow. I'd been here too many times over the past year, first for Clayton's mother Lorraine's funeral after her untimely passing, then for the hearings and sentencing that finally saw Terrence put behind bars for the rest of his natural life. Each visit had been more somber than the last, the weight of this place's history like a shroud draped over my shoulders. But not today. Today, I carried a renewed sense of purpose, a lift in my step that had been sorely missing for far too long. As I neared the secluded corner where the newest edition lay, a small figure came into view, sitting cross-legged before the simple granite headstone. "There you are," I called out softly, unable to keep the faint smile from tugging at my lips. "I was wondering where you'd gotten off to." Eliza turned, her face breaking into a warm smile that still managed to take my breath away after all this time. In the 2 years since her harrowing rescue and Terrence's downfall, she'd blossomed from a haunted waif into a vibrant, healthy young woman. Her eyes shining with a light I'd once feared was extinguished forever. "Sorry, I just needed a moment," she replied, her gaze drifting back to the gravestone with a wistful expression. "It still doesn't feel real sometimes, you know? After everything." I settled onto the damp grass beside her, draping an arm around her shoulders. She immediately leaned into my embrace with a contented sigh. "I know it's been an incredible adjustment after what that monster put you through," I murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to the crown of her head. "But you've handled it with more strength and grace than anyone could have hoped for, sweetheart. You're an inspiration to us all." A faint blush colored her cheeks at the praise, but her lips curved upwards in that radiant smile once more. "I had a good role model," she said simply, reaching out to grasp my free hand in her slender fingers. "If it wasn't for you, Evelyn, I might have never." Her voice trailed off, but I could hear the unspoken meaning loud and clear. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, a silent promise that those nightmarish days were firmly in the past now. "Well, you'll never have to worry about that again," I assured her fiercely. "Terrence is gone for good, and the rest of us, we're going to be just fine." We lapsed into a comfortable silence, turning our attention back to the gravestone and the words etched into its timeless surface. "In memory of Eliza Carson, beloved daughter, cousin, and friend, may you forever rest in peace." So much pain, so much heartache had stemmed from those 5 simple words, a tragic lie perpetrated by a deeply disturbed man blinded by his own greed and depravity. But in the end, it was a truth that had set Eliza free from her suffering, giving her a new lease on the life that had nearly been stolen away. A gentle breeze rustled the trees overhead, carrying the first hints of spring, of new beginnings and fresh starts. I watched contentedly as the wind tousled Eliza's golden tresses, her face tilted towards the pale sunlight filtering through the clouds like a flower unfurling its petals. There was still healing to be done, scars that may never fully fade. But in that moment, bathed in nature's delicate renewal, I felt a profound sense of peace and hope, our future. The nightmare was finally over. And it was time to awaken to the world anew. As Eliza and I rose, hand in hand, to make our way back home, I silently vowed that from this day forward, we would embrace each moment with open hearts and minds. No longer shackled by the shadows of Terrence's malice, we would bask in the warm glow of hard-won justice and dare to dream of what lay ahead. A new dawn was on the horizon, burning bright and radiant with possibilities, and we would greet it together, unafraid.
It was a gift from my husband that I received a wedding dress that cost $15,000. But on the day of our wedding, his mother, who was envious of me, surreptitiously lit it on fire. I was so taken aback that I collapsed to the ground. It was my husband, Aidan, who rushed to the scene and extinguished the fire, thereby saving my life. However, what transpired after that was something that she had not anticipated happening. I devised the supreme form of retribution. I am still able to recall the very first time that I came into contact with Aidan. Suddenly, it seemed as though time had slowed down, and everything else vanished. It was only him that I could see. In addition to being tall and charming, Aidan Gillen, a professional rugby player who was 30 years old, has a smile that could make any room brighter. The fact that he was attractive was not the only thing that drew me to him. It was the manner in which he dealt with me. Aidan was wonderful. He was kind with me, and he made me feel unique in a way that I had never experienced before. I was 29 years old at the time, and I was working in the city of Boston as an office assistant. My life was uncomplicated and unchanging. I had a lovely family, a wonderful job, and a group of close friends, but I always had the feeling that something was missing. It turned out that Aiden was the person in question. Our first encounter was at a gathering hosted by a friend. I was hanging out with a handful of coworkers at the time, while he was there with his friends from the national rugby team. This instant connection was something I felt from the time we started chatting to one another. There were a lot of things that we had in common, including our desire for experiencing new things and going on adventures, as well as our opinion that family is very important. As a potential mate, Aiden was all I had hoped for and more. In a short amount of time, our relationship flourished, and we were inseparable. Our conversation covered everything, including our plans for the future together. Before this, I had never been in a relationship in which I felt valued and loved to such an extent. When I was with Aiden, I had the impression that I was the most important person in the entire world. Soon after, we began discussing the possibility of getting married. It was like a dream that came true, and I couldn't wait for the day when we were going to get married. As a result of the fact that Aiden was everything I had ever desired, I believed that nothing could harm our happiness. On the other hand, every relationship has its difficulties, and ours arrived in the form of Miriam, an individual who is his mother. A few times prior, Aiden had brought her up in conversation. In spite of the fact that he spoke with courtesy, there was always a trace of stress in his voice whenever he discussed her. Until I met her, I didn't give it much thought. At least, that's how I felt. When I first encountered Miriam Gillen, I was able to meet her in person. She was a woman who was in her early 60s and presented herself in a forceful manner. In addition to having sharp features and nicely styled hair, she possessed a chilly personality that made me feel apprehensive. As soon as I laid eyes on her, I was struck by a peculiar shiver. Although she did not behave in an impolite manner, there was something about her that made her appear remote and perhaps judging. My irritation stemmed from the fact that she did not make me feel welcome. "I'm glad you could finally meet my mother, Taylor," Aiden said, trying to break the awkward silence during our lunch together. But Miriam barely looked at me when she replied, "Nice to meet you." Her tone was flat, and her eyes didn't stay on me for more than a few seconds. The air felt heavy with discomfort, but Aiden kept reassuring me, "Don't worry about her. She's just a little protective." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with her. A few weeks after that tense meeting, Aiden surprised me with an incredible gift, a wedding dress. Not just any dress, though. It was worth $115,000, a luxurious gown that sparkled and shimmered with every movement. When he gave it to me, I felt overwhelmed with joy. It wasn't just the price that made me happy, it was the thought behind it. Aiden knew how much I dreamed of wearing the perfect dress on my wedding day, and he made that dream come true. The moment I saw the dress, I gasped in disbelief. "Oh my gosh, Aiden, this is amazing." My hands trembled as I ran them over the delicate fabric. "I can't believe you did this for me." He smiled warmly and said, "You deserve it, Taylor. I want everything about our wedding to be perfect for you." But I had no idea that this dress would become more than just a symbol of love. It would bring out something darker. When Miriam found out about the dress, the tension between us grew even stronger. I expected her to be happy for us, but instead, her face went cold as stone when she heard how much Aiden had spent on it. "That dress is too much, Aiden," she said tightly, her voice filled with restraint. "You don't need to spoil her with such extravagant things." "Spoil me? Her words left me stunned. I never thought of the dress as being about spoiling me. For me, it was about feeling special and loved, but Miriam didn't see it that way. Aiden, however, stood firm. "I don't care, Mom. Taylor deserves this. She's my fiancée, and I love her. This is my choice, and I'm standing by it." The more Miriam disapproved, the colder things felt between us. I didn't want to cause any problems, but the tension between us was impossible to ignore. I couldn't help but wonder, why was she so upset about a dress meant to bring me joy? Then came the wedding day. I walked into the venue wearing my $115,000 dress, and all eyes were on me. Guests admired how beautiful I looked, and I felt proud with Aiden by my side. I was ready to start our new life together. As people came up to congratulate me, I happily shared the story behind the dress. "Aiden gave me this beautiful dress," I said, smiling brightly. The compliments poured in, and I truly felt like the luckiest woman in the world. But then, just as everything felt perfect, Miriam approached me. Her expression was hard to read. She gave me a tight hug and whispered in my ear, "Your time is over now." I froze, unsure of what she meant, but there was no time to think. Suddenly, I felt warmth on my back. Before I could react, I realized my dress was on fire. Screams filled the room, and I spun around in panic. Miriam stood nearby, holding a cigarette lighter, her face calm but with a cold smile. My heart raced as I tried to process what was happening. I looked around desperately for Aiden. He was across the room with some friends, but when he saw the flames, his eyes widened in horror. He pushed through the crowd and ran toward me. The fire spread quickly, burning the outer layers of the dress. Aiden reached me just in time and worked to put out the flames using his jacket to smother them. The heat had seared through the fabric, leaving me with minor burns on my arms. My dress was ruined, but I was alive. "I'm fine, Aiden, really," I said, trying to reassure him, though inside I was shaken to my core. I was in shock. What had just happened? How could Miriam do something so awful? The rest of the wedding felt like a blur. I changed into a simple dress, but the sense of betrayal stayed with me. Something was very wrong, but I didn't fully understand it yet. That night, when Aiden and I got home, I overheard him talking to his mother. Miriam was furious, and her words sent chills through me. She wasn't upset about the dress catching fire. No, she was angry that Aiden had put the fire out. I didn't want to see that expensive dress on her. Miriam shouted, "Why did you even buy her something so extravagant?" In that moment, everything clicked. Miriam's jealousy wasn't just about the dress. She didn't want me to have the spotlight. She didn't want Aiden to love me more than her. I had been so blinded by love that I hadn't seen it sooner. Her coldness, her passive-aggressive comments. It all made sense now. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't let her control our lives. Aiden loved me, but it felt like he was trapped in her grasp. I had to take control. That was when I decided to start my journey of taking back my power. Though I knew it wouldn't be easy, this was just the beginning. The days after the wedding were a blur. I kept replaying everything in my mind. The fire, the ruined dress, Miriam's cruel words. It was hard to believe that someone who was supposed to be family could do something so terrible. Aiden, on the other hand, seemed to shrug it all off like it was no big deal. He acted like nothing had happened, and honestly, I didn't know how to feel about that. The tension between us grew. We tried to act normal, but I couldn't ignore the emotional scars Miriam had left behind. The burns on my arms were nothing compared to the hurt inside. Aiden tried to be supportive, but it felt like I was carrying all the emotional weight in our relationship. About a week after the wedding, we were sitting on the couch together. I could tell something was bothering him. He kept glancing nervously between me and his phone. Finally, he spoke up. "Taylor, we need to talk about something." My heart skipped a beat. I already had a feeling about what it was. "Is this about Miriam?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked down at his hands, avoiding my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about my mom and how she's been acting," he said quietly. "I know she's upset about the dress, and I just want you to understand she's not used to sharing me with anyone. It's hard for her." A knot tightened in my stomach. Was he seriously defending her behavior? Could he not see how toxic his mother was? I stared at him, feeling a wave of frustration. "Aiden, it's not just about the dress," I said, my voice trembling. "It's about everything, the way she treats me, the way she makes me feel worthless. That's not normal." He finally looked at me, his expression soft. I know, and I'm sorry. I really am, but she's my mom. I can't just cut her off like that." "Why not?" I asked, my frustration spilling over. "She's been controlling you your entire life, and now she's trying to control our relationship. Why are you so afraid of her?" Aiden flinched at my words. "I'm not scared, Taylor. She's been there for me my whole life. She's my family." Tears welled up in my eyes. "And what about me? Am I supposed to just accept her mistreatment because she's your family? Am I supposed to let her treat me like I don't matter?" He fell silent, his face conflicted. I knew he was trying to make sense of it all, but it wasn't enough. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was losing him to a woman who wouldn't even respect me as his partner. The next day, I overheard another conversation. This time, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. It just happened. I was walking through the house when I heard Aiden and his mother talking in the living room. I froze when I heard Miriam's sharp, angry voice. "You really let her get to you, didn't you? Miriam's bad. You let her ruin everything. The dress, the wedding. She doesn't belong in our family. She's just a distraction." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Miriam's jealousy ran so deep that she couldn't stand the sight of me with her son. And Aiden, he didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't stand up for me. "Mom, please," Aiden finally said, his voice strained. "Stop. I'm trying to make this work. I love Taylor, and I love you." Miriam's tone turned icy. "I've always been your priority, Aiden. And if you really think she's the one for you, then why did you give her such an expensive dress? Why would you spoil her like that?" I felt my heart sink. It was clear to me now, this wasn't just about a dress or a wedding. Miriam didn't want me in her family, and Aiden didn't know how to choose between us. A surge of anger rushed through me, and I couldn't hold it back. I walked into the living room, my face flushed with emotion. "Why do you care so much about a dress?" I demanded, my voice trembling with frustration. "Why does it bother you that Aiden loves me? Why are you trying to ruin everything between us?" Miriam turned to me, her expression cold and full of disdain. "Because you are a distraction, Taylor. A beautiful, expensive distraction. But you'll never truly be part of this family." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. How could she say that? How could she treat me like I didn't matter? "Aiden, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not." But Aiden just looked at me, torn and helpless. "Taylor, please." "I'm trying. You don't understand. This is hard for me." I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words. "It's hard for you." I thought bitterly, what about me? I couldn't listen anymore. I needed to get away from him from Miriam, from all of it. That night, I went to my parents' house, feeling like my whole world was falling apart. I sat in my old bedroom, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. It wasn't just about Miriam anymore. It was about Aiden, too. I was starting to see the truth. I couldn't be happy with someone who wouldn't stand up for me. I felt like a stranger in my own relationship. That's when I made my decision. I couldn't live this way anymore. I needed to get away from Miriam, from Aiden, and from all the manipulation and control. I decided I needed a divorce, but it wasn't just about leaving. I couldn't walk away without confronting the truth about what Miriam had done. I couldn't let her get away with it. I needed to fight back. It wasn't an easy choice. Deciding to divorce Aiden felt like a heavy weight had been lifted, but it also terrified me. I loved him truly, loved him, but I couldn't ignore the reality anymore. Miriam wasn't just controlling, she was toxic. She had no respect for me, and no matter how much Aiden claimed to love me, he would always choose her over me. The way he couldn't stand up to her, the way he let her destroy our relationship, it was something I couldn't ignore anymore. I deserved better, and now I was ready to fight for myself. I spent the next few days at my parents' house, trying to process everything. I felt like I was walking through a thick fog, unable to see clearly. I couldn't stop thinking about the wedding, the fire, and Miriam's cold, calculated words. Her voice echoed in my mind, and every time I replayed the scene, my heart sank all over again. One night, as I lay in bed, an idea came to me. I needed proof, something Aiden couldn't deny, something that would force him to see who his mother really was. The next morning, I grabbed my phone and started going through the footage from the wedding. I had recorded everything, thinking it would be a beautiful memory to look back on. But now, I wasn't sure if I'd ever want to revisit those moments again. As I skimmed through the video, my stomach churned. Then I saw it. In the moment Miriam hugged me, whispering those chilling words in my ear, her hand moved toward her pocket. She pulled out a cigarette lighter. My breath caught in my throat. I had noticed it during the chaos, but there it was, clear as day. Miriam had deliberately set my dress on fire. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, unable to believe it. How could she do this? Why would she do this? But as I thought about it, the truth became clearer. This wasn't just jealousy. Miriam was terrified of losing her control over Aiden. She was willing to do anything, even ruin our lives, to keep her grip on him. With the video as proof, I knew I had to act. I couldn't let her get away with this. I called the police. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but I didn't have another choice. She had risked my safety, destroyed the most important day of my life, and manipulated Aiden for far too long. It had to stop. The police took my report seriously, and an investigation was launched. It didn't take long for them to gather enough evidence to arrest Miriam. When I got the call telling me she had been taken into custody, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief because she was finally being held accountable, and anger because she had taken so much from me. This wasn't just about the dress or the fire. It was about everything she had done to try to break me. But now, I was finally taking back control of my life. I knew Miriam was finally going to face the consequences for everything she had done to me and Aiden. But I couldn't help feeling angry too. Angry about the pain she caused, and the way Aiden let her actions go unchecked. When Aiden found out about her arrest, he was furious. He called me, shouting and accusing me of ruining his family. But I didn't care anymore. I had tried to be patient, tried to make things work. But I had given him every chance to stand up for me, and he hadn't. In my eyes, he was just as responsible as Miriam. "I can't believe you'd do this to me," Aiden yelled, his voice trembling with rage. "She's my mother, Taylor. She's the only family I have left." "Well, I was your family too," I said, my voice steady but firm. "But I wasn't enough for you, was I? You chose her over me, and you always will." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his heavy breathing, filled with frustration and disbelief. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied calmly. "I'm done, Aiden. I can't live like this anymore." And with that, I hung up. I knew it was over. My marriage was over, but instead of feeling broken, I felt free. Free from Miriam, free from Aiden, and free from all the manipulation and control that had held me down for so long. The police eventually charged Miriam with multiple offenses, including endangering my safety. She was sentenced to a long prison term. When I heard the news, I felt a strange sense of justice. I had taken a stand, fought back, and won. But the real victory wasn't her punishment. It was reclaiming my life. I promised myself that I would never let anyone, not even family, control my happiness again. After everything that had happened, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The chaos, the heartbreak, the fire, it was all behind me. For the first time in months, a sense of peace settled over me. But I knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Moving on. Rebuilding my life started slowly. I spent the first few weeks focusing on myself, something I hadn't done in years. My life had always revolved around others, Aiden, his family, and trying to keep everyone happy. But now it was about me. I began reconnecting with old friends I hadn't seen in ages. I spent more time with my own family, the people who truly loved and supported me. For the first time in a long while, I found joy in simply being alone. Piece by piece, I started to rebuild, and with each step, I felt a little stronger. I truly felt strong when I looked at who I had become. I had been through so much, yet here I was, standing tall. I had fought for myself and won. It was a power I had never felt before. I thought my story was over, but then something unexpected happened. A few months had passed since Miriam's arrest. Aiden and I hadn't spoken since that last phone call. I thought he might be angry or try to contact me, but he didn't. Then one afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it was Aiden. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I was ready for this conversation. "Taylor," he said softly, his voice sounding tired. "I've been thinking about everything, and I know you probably won't forgive me, but I need to apologize. I didn't see it back then, but I see it now. I was blind to what my mom was doing. I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry." I didn't know how to respond. My heart felt torn. Part of me wanted to yell at him for everything he had put me through, but another part of me just wanted closure. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Aiden," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "You had so many chances, and you chose your mom over me every single time. I'm not going to let that happen again. I've moved on." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, like he was trying to find the right words. "I understand," he said quietly. "I just want you to know that I've changed. I see now how wrong I was. I'm sorry for everything." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his apology, but deep down I knew it wasn't enough. He had failed me when I needed him most, and now I was stronger because of it. In a firm tone, I said, "Goodbye, Aiden," and my tone was calm and confident. "Take care of yourself." It was over in an instant, just like that. This was the last chapter of that period of my life, and it was now over. I had liberated myself from the man with whom I had once imagined spending the rest of my life, from the family that had never welcomed me, and from a life that had been preventing me from fully realizing my potential. Although life was not without its flaws, the fact that it was mine was sufficient. Once more, I was not going to give someone the power to govern my life. No one, not even Miriam. Anyone. The strength of a woman who was willing to fight for herself was something that she never understood, despite the fact that she was quite manipulative. As time went on, I resolved to concentrate on my own contentment. Investing my time and energy into my job, discovering inner peace, and engaging in activities that brought me genuine happiness were the things I focused on. After gaining this knowledge, I realized how vital it was to advocate for myself and to never let the envy or control of another person to constitute my identity. A little over a year later, I received information that completely altered my life. I was carrying a child. It came as a surprise, but it brought me a level of happiness that I had never experienced before. The plan was for me to become a mother. I had made up my mind that I would bring up my child in an environment where love, respect, and happiness were prioritized above all else. That day, when I told my parents, is still fresh in my mind. Upon hearing the news, my mother's face lit up with delight, and I could see the pride that she appeared to be feeling in her eyes. She was aware of everything that I had been challenged with and how far I had progressed. I had reclaimed my life, and I was at last constructing a future that would be governed by my own specifications. As I sat with my family and the man who had become my true partner, someone who loved me for who I was and respected me for who I was, I realized that I had made the correct decisions. The events of my past will forever be a part of my narrative, but they no longer serve to define who I am. I had no restrictions. I had prevailed in my struggle, and now I was enjoying the life that I had always envisioned for myself.
The sound of Nathan's laughter drifted through the open window, and my stomach clenched. I knew that laugh. It was the one he reserved for her. I set down my mug of tea with trembling hands and peered out into our backyard. There they were, Nathan and Abigail, heads bent close together over his phone. My husband's childhood friend had become a constant presence in our lives, and I was sick of it. "Hey, you two," I called out, forcing a smile as I stepped onto the patio. "What's so funny?" Nathan looked up, his blue eyes twinkling. "Oh, Molly, come here. You've got to see this video Abby sent me. It's hilarious." I gritted my teeth at the nickname. No one else called her Abby. I walked over, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. Abigail flashed me a bright smile. "Hi, Molly, how are you feeling? Nathan told me you weren't feeling well earlier." "I'm fine," I said curtly. "What's this video about?" Nathan held out his phone, but I made no move to take it. After an awkward moment, he pulled it back. "It's, just a funny cat video. You know how Abby loves those." "Right," I said, "because you two have so much in common." Nathan's brow furrowed. "Molly, what's wrong?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger bubbling inside me. "Nothing. I just thought we were going to have a quiet evening at home. I didn't realize Abigail would be joining us." Again. Abigail's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I can go." "No." Nathan said quickly. "You're not intruding. Molly's just tired, right, honey?" I stared at him, incredulous. Was he really going to dismiss my feelings like that? "Actually," I said, my voice tight, "I'd like to talk to my husband. Alone." Abigail stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Of course. I should be heading home anyway. Thanks for the coffee, Nathan." As she walked towards the gate, Nathan called out, "Drive safe, Abby." The moment she was out of earshot, I rounded on him. "What the hell, Nathan? We had plans tonight." He held up his hands defensively. "Whoa, calm down. Abigail just stopped by for a quick coffee. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," I snapped. "She's always here, always texting you, always the topic of conversation. I'm sick of it." Nathan's face hardened. "She's my oldest friend, Molly. You knew that when we got married." "Friend?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call it when you spend more time with her than your own wife?" "That's not fair," he said, his voice rising. "I work with Abigail. We're on the same project. Of course we spend time together. I shook my head, fighting back tears. It's more than that, and you know it. The way you look at her, the inside jokes. I feel like I'm the third wheel in my own marriage. Nathan's expression softened. He reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. Molly, honey, you're overreacting. There's nothing going on between me and Abigail. I love you. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But the nagging doubt in my gut wouldn't go away. Then prove it, I said. Set some boundaries with her. Put our marriage first. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're being ridiculous. I'm not going to cut off my best friend just because you're feeling insecure. His words hit me like a slap. Insecure? Is that what he thought this was? Before I could respond, Nathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw Abigail's name flash on the screen. I have to take this, he said, already turning away. It's about work. As he walked into the house, answering the call with a cheerful, "Hey, Abby," I stood there, frozen. In that moment, I knew. Something had to change. And if Nathan wouldn't do it, I would have to take matters into my own hands. I stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, my heart racing with a mix of joy and dread. After months of trying, we'd finally done it. I was pregnant, but as I stood there in our bathroom, clutching the test, all I could think about was Abigail. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the bedroom where Nathan was getting dressed for work. "Nathan," I said, my voice shaky, "I have something to tell you." He turned, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. "What is it, Molly? Is everything okay?" I held out the test. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Nathan just stared at it, then his face broke into a wide grin. "Oh my God, Molly, that's amazing!" He rushed over and wrapped me in a tight hug. I melted into his embrace, allowing myself a moment of pure happiness. This was what I'd wanted for so long, a family with the man I loved. But then Nathan's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled away to check it, and I saw that familiar softening of his expression that only happened when Abigail texted. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Nathan's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, it's Abigail. She has some news too, apparently. Yeah, she wants to meet up for lunch to tell us." My stomach clenched. "Us? Why does she need to tell us both?" He shrugged, already typing a reply. "I don't know, but she says it's important. Come on, it'll be fun. We can celebrate our news too." I wanted to argue, to tell him that this should be our moment, just the 2 of us. But I bit my tongue. "Fine," I said. "Where are we meeting her?" A few hours later, we sat across from Abigail at our usual cafe. She was practically glowing, like her hand resting on her stomach in a way that made my blood run cold. "I'm so glad you both could make it," Abigail said, beaming. "I have the most wonderful news." I gripped my water glass tightly, already knowing what she was going to say. "I'm pregnant," Abigail announced, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Nathan's reaction felt like a punch to my gut. His face lit up, and he reached across the table to grab Abigail's hand. "Abby, that's incredible! Congratulations!" I watched in horror as my husband and his best friend shared a moment of pure elation. It was as if I wasn't even there. "Molly?" Abigail's voice broke through my shock. "Aren't you going to say anything?" I plastered on a fake smile. "Congratulations, Abigail. That's wonderful news." Nathan turned to me, his eyes dancing with excitement. "Can you believe it, Molly? You're both pregnant at the same time. Our kids will grow up together, just like Abby and I did." In that moment, I felt like I was drowning. The thought of our children being as close as Nathan and Abigail made me want to scream. "Actually," I said, my voice tight, "I'm not feeling well. I think I need to go home." Nathan's brow furrowed with concern. "Are you okay? Do you want me to come with you?" I shook my head, already standing up. "No, you stay. Celebrate with Abigail. I'll be fine on my own." As I walked out of the cafe, I heard Nathan call after me, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't bear to see him comforting Abigail, sharing in her joy while I felt like my world was crumbling. At home, I curled up on our bed, my hand resting on my still flat stomach. This should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, I felt more alone than ever. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. How could I tell him that what I needed was for him to choose me, to put our family first? As I lay there, a resolve began to form in my heart. If Nathan wouldn't set boundaries with Abigail, I would have to take matters into my own hands. For the sake of my child, our child, I had to fight for my marriage. But first I had to find out exactly what I was up against. The sharp pain in my abdomen jolted me awake. I gasped, clutching my stomach as another wave of agony washed over me. "Nathan," I called out, panic rising in my throat. He stumbled into our bedroom, bleary-eyed. "Molly, what's wrong?" "The baby," I choked out. "Something's wrong with the baby." The next few hours passed in a blur of ambulance sirens, hospital corridors, and worried doctors. By dawn, I lay in a hospital bed, exhausted and scared, with Nathan holding my hand. "The good news is, the baby's okay," the doctor said, her face serious. "But you're experiencing some complications, Mrs. Walker. You'll need to be on bed rest for the next few weeks, at least." I nodded, relief washing over me. Our baby was safe, for now. As the doctor left, Nathan squeezed my hand. "Don't worry, honey. I'll take care of everything." But over the next few days, it became clear that Nathan's idea of taking care of everything meant calling Abigail for help. I was dozing on the couch when I heard them in the kitchen. "Thanks for coming over, Abby," Nathan said. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Of course," Abigail replied. "Anything for you two. How's Molly doing?" "She's struggling," Nathan sighed. "This bed rest is really getting to her." I clenched my fists, fighting back tears. How dare he discuss me with her like that? "Nathan," I called out, my voice sharp. "Can you come here, please?" He appeared in the doorway, Abigail hovering behind him. "What is it, Molly? Do you need something?" "Yes," I said, sitting up slowly. "I need to talk to my husband, alone." Abigail's face fell. "Oh, I'll go start on dinner." As soon as she was out of earshot, I turned to Nathan. "What is she doing here?" He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "She's helping, Molly. You heard the doctor. You need to rest." "And I need my husband," I shot back. "Not his, whatever she is to you." Nathan's eyes flashed with anger. "She's my friend, Molly. My pregnant friend who's going through this alone. The least we can do is help her out." "Help her out?" I laughed bitterly. "Nathan, I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child, and I'm the one who needs help right now." He softened, sitting on the edge of the couch. "I know, honey, and I'm here for you, but Abigail needs us too." I shook my head, tears spilling over. "No, Nathan, you need to choose. It's her or me." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stared at me, his face a mix of shock and hurt. "Molly, you can't ask me to do that." In that moment, something inside me broke. "I think you've already made your choice," I whispered. Before Nathan could respond, Abigail's voice drifted in from the kitchen. "Nathan? Can you come help me with this?" He hesitated, looking between me and the kitchen door. "I should." "Go," I said, turning away from him. "Just go." As Nathan left the room, I heard him and Abigail laughing together in the kitchen. The sound cut through me like a knife. I placed a protective hand over my stomach, a fierce determination taking root in my heart. If Nathan wouldn't put our family first, I would have to take matters into my own hands. Slowly, carefully, I reached for my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd use. "Hello?" a gruff voice answered. "Richard?" I said, my voice trembling. "It's Molly. I need your help." Nathan's father was silent for a moment. Then, "What's going on, Molly?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's about Nathan and Abigail. There's something you and Janet need to know." As I began to speak, I knew there was no going back. But for the sake of my child, I was ready to fight, even if it meant tearing everything apart. The tiny microphone felt like a lead weight in my hand. I stared at it, my heart pounding with a mix of guilt and determination. Was I really going to do this? Spy on my own husband? Molly? Sarah's voice snapped me back to reality. My old college roommate stood in my living room, concern etched on her face. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "I have to know, Sarah, for my sake and for my baby's." She sighed, running a hand through her short blonde hair. "I get it. This is a big step. There's no going back once you do this." "I know," I whispered, "but I can't live like this anymore. The constant doubt, the suspicion, it's eating me alive." Sarah squeezed my shoulder. "Okay, let's do this then." With trembling hands, I unzipped Nathan's work bag. The guilt threatened to overwhelm me, but I pushed it down. I thought of all the late nights at the office, the secretive text messages, the way his eyes lit up when Abigail walked into a room. No, I had to know the truth. I carefully tucked the tiny microphone into a hidden pocket, making sure it was secure. Just as I zipped the bag closed, I heard the front door open. Molly, I'm home! Panic surged through me. Quick, I hissed to Sarah. Act natural! Nathan walked into the living room, his eyebrows raising in surprise. Oh, hey, Sarah, I didn't know you were coming over. Sarah plastered on a smile. Just checking on the mama-to-be. How are you, Nathan? As they made small talk, I tried to calm my racing heart. Had he noticed anything amiss? But Nathan seemed oblivious, kissing me on the cheek before heading to the kitchen. I've got to run, he called out, meeting Abigail for dinner to go over some work stuff. Of course he was. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to sound casual. Okay, honey, have fun. As soon as the door closed behind him, I collapsed onto the couch, my legs shaking. Sarah sat beside me, her face grim. You okay? I nodded, unable to speak. What had I just done? The next few days were torture. Every time Nathan left the house, I found myself glued to my phone, listening intently through the app connected to the microphone. Most of it was mundane, work conversations, small talk with colleagues, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Then, on the third day, I heard it. Abby, we need to talk. Nathan's voice was low, serious. My heart stopped. This was it. I know, Nate. Abigail replied, her voice thick with emotion. I can't keep doing this. It's not fair to anyone. You're right, Nathan sighed. We have to tell her. Molly deserves to know the truth. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. My worst fears confirmed. They were having an affair, and now they were planning to come clean. But as I continued to listen, my confusion grew. Something wasn't adding up. They weren't talking about a romantic relationship at all. Instead, I heard phrases like genetic testing and family history. Suddenly, the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp. Abigail wasn't just Nathan's childhood friend. She was his half-sister. The revelation left me reeling. All this time, I'd been suspicious of the wrong thing entirely. But why had they kept this a secret? And what did it mean for our baby? As I sat there, my mind racing, I knew I had a decision to make. Do I confront Nathan with what I've learned? Or do I wait for him to come to me? One thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. And as I placed a protective hand over my growing belly, I realized that the stakes were higher than ever. Whatever came next, I had to be ready to fight for my family, no matter the cost. I sat in my car, parked across the street from the little cafe where Nathan and Abigail were meeting. My hands shook as I adjusted the earpiece connected to the listening device in Nathan's bag. This was it, the moment of truth. Are you sure you want to do this, Molly? Sarah's voice crackled through my phone. It's not too late to turn back. I took a deep breath. I have to know, Sarah. For my sanity, for my baby, I need to hear it for myself. As if on cue, Nathan's voice came through the earpiece. Abby, we can't keep doing this. It's tearing me apart. My heart clenched. Here it was, the confession I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. I know, Nate, Abigail replied, her voice thick with emotion. But what choice do we have? If we tell Molly the truth, it could destroy everything. Tears blurred my vision as I listened, each word a dagger to my heart. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. She deserves to know that her baby might be at risk, Nathan said. The genetic testing results. I froze. Genetic testing? What were they talking about? Abigail's voice trembled. I know, but how do we tell her that that he's my father too? That there's a chance our babies could have the same genetic disorder? The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Abigail was Nathan's half-sister? This wasn't an affair. It was something far more complicated. We have to tell her, Nathan insisted. And my parents. God, Dad doesn't even know about you. This is such a mess. I sat there, stunned, as they continued to talk. The pieces started to fall into place. The secretive conversations, the intense bond, the shared worry over their pregnancies. It wasn't betrayal I'd been sensing, but fear and guilt over a family secret. Suddenly, a tap on my window made me jump. I looked up to see Richard, Nathan's father, peering in at me with concern. Molly? What are you doing out here? Panic surged through me. I scrambled to turn off the listening device and hide the earpiece. Richard, I was just... But as I looked into his eyes so similar to Nathan's, and I now realized, to Abigail's, something in me snapped. I got out of the car, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. We need to talk, Richard. All of us. His brow furrowed. What's going on, Molly? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to do. I know about Abigail. I know she's your daughter. The color drained from Richard's face. How did you... It doesn't matter, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. What matters is that we're all going to sit down and talk about this now. Before he could respond, I marched towards the cafe, Richard trailing behind me in shocked silence. As I pushed open the door, Nathan and Abigail looked up, their faces paling at the sight of us. Molly? Nathan stood, his voice filled with confusion and fear. Dad? What's going on? I looked at each of them in turn. My husband, his secret sister, their father. The weight of their secrets, of my own actions, pressed down on me, but I refused to buckle under it. What's going on? I said, my voice steady, is that we're going to have a long overdue family meeting, and we're going to start with the truth. All of it. As I sat down at their table, I knew there was no turning back. Whatever happened next would change all of our lives forever. But for the sake of my child, of all our children, I was ready to face it head on. The tension in Janet's living room was suffocating. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my hands protectively cradling my swollen belly as I faced the people who had turned my world upside down. Nathan paced nervously, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Abigail perched on an armchair, her face pale and drawn. Richard stood by the fireplace, looking like a man about to face a firing squad. And Janet, bless her heart, bustled about offering tea and cookies as if this were just another family gathering. Enough, I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence. It's time we all laid our cards on the table. Nathan stopped pacing, his eyes finally meeting mine. Molly, I don't know where to start. How about with the truth? I snapped, my patience wearing thin. The whole truth, Nathan, about you and Abigail. Janet gasped, nearly dropping the tea tray. What about Nathan and Abigail? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. They're half-siblings. Isn't that right, Richard? The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Richard, who seemed to age a decade in that moment. It's true, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Abigail is my daughter. I had an affair years ago. I never knew about her until recently. Janet's face crumpled. Richard, how could you? As Janet's sobs filled the room, I turned to Nathan and Abigail. And you two? How long have you known? Nathan ran a hand through his hair. A few months. We found out when Abigail was doing some genetic testing for her pregnancy. The doctor noticed some similarities in our family histories. And you didn't think to tell me? I interrupted, my voice rising. Your wife? The mother of your child? We were scared, Molly, Abigail said, tears streaming down her face. We didn't know how to tell anyone. And then when we found out about the genetic risk for our babies... My heart clenched. What genetic risk? Nathan knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. There's a chance our baby might have a rare genetic disorder. It's why Abigail and I have been spending so much time together. We've been consulting specialists, trying to figure out our options. I pulled my hands away, feeling sick. So you've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, all because you couldn't find the courage to tell me the truth? I'm so sorry, Molly, Nathan pleaded. We never meant to hurt you. We were just trying to protect everyone. Protect everyone? I laughed bitterly. Look around, Nathan. Does anyone in this room look protected to you? Janet was still crying softly, comforted by a guilt-ridden Richard. Abigail looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. And Nathan? Nathan just looked lost. I stood up, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. I think I've heard enough. I need some air. As I headed for the door, Nathan called after me. Molly, wait, where are you going? I turned back, taking in the scene one last time. This family, with all its secrets and lies. My husband, torn between loyalty to his sister and his wife. My unborn child facing an uncertain future. I don't know, I said honestly, but I do know this. I can't stay here. Not now. Maybe not ever. With that, I walked out, ignoring the pleas behind me. As I got into my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, I realized I had no idea where to go or what to do next. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. And as I drove away from the house that held so many shattered dreams, I knew I had a choice to make. Fight for this family that had betrayed me, or forge a new path on my own. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, for myself and for my child. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands as I stood outside Nathan's office. My heart raced, but my resolve was ironclad. This was it. The moment that would change everything. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Nathan looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Molly, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now." He nodded, gesturing for me to sit. I remained standing. "I've made a decision, Nathan," I said, placing the envelope on his desk. "I want a divorce." The color drained from his face. "Molly, please, we can work this out. I know I messed up, but—" "No," I cut him off. "There's no working this out. You lied to me. You put Abigail before me, before our child. I can't trust you anymore." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "What about the baby? Our family?" I placed a protective hand over my swollen belly. "I'll raise this child on my own if I have to, but I won't subject them to a life of lies and divided loyalties." Just then there was a commotion outside. The door burst open, and Richard and Janet rushed in, followed closely by Abigail. "We heard you were here," Janet said, breathless. "Molly, dear, please reconsider. We're family." I laughed bitterly. "Family? Is that what you call this mess of secrets and betrayal?" Richard stepped forward, his face grave. "Molly, I know we've all made mistakes, but surely we can find a way to move past this, for the sake of the children." "The children," I repeated, my anger rising. "You mean the children who might have life-threatening genetic disorders because of your affair? The children who will grow up in a web of lies unless someone has the courage to break the cycle?" Abigail sobbed quietly in the corner. "I'm so sorry, Molly. I never meant for any of this to happen." I turned to her, my voice softening slightly. "I know, Abigail, but intent doesn't change the outcome. We all have to live with the consequences of our actions." Nathan stood, reaching for me. "Molly, please, I love you. We can get through this together." I stepped back, out of his reach. "No, Nathan, love isn't enough. Not anymore." I picked up the envelope and handed it to him. "These are the divorce papers. I'm asking for full custody with supervised visitation for you. I also want alimony and child support." Nathan's face crumpled as he leafed through the documents. This is everything. You're taking everything." "Not everything," I said quietly. "Just what I need to start over, to give our child a chance at a life free from all of this." Richard cleared his throat. "Now, Molly, let's not be hasty. Perhaps we can come to some sort of arrangement. For the sake of the family name." "The family name?" I exploded. "Is that all you care about? Your precious reputation?" Janet stepped in, her voice pleading. "Molly, dear, we can help. We'll support you and the baby. You don't have to do this alone." For a moment, I wavered. The thought of facing single motherhood was terrifying. But then I looked at their faces. Nathan's guilt, Abigail's shame, Richard and Janet's desperate attempts to maintain control, and I knew what I had to do. "I appreciate the offer," I said, my voice firm. "But I think it's best for everyone if I make a clean break. This family has too many secrets, too much baggage. My child deserves a fresh start." I turned to leave, but Nathan's voice stopped me. "Molly, wait. What about the genetic testing? What if our baby needs us, all of us, to get through this?" I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the uncertain future, pressed down on me. For a moment I felt like I couldn't breathe, but then I felt a small kick from within, my baby reminding me of what was truly important. I turned back to face them one last time. "If that happens," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for now, this is goodbye." As I walked out of the office, leaving behind a chorus of protests and pleas, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own destiny. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, for myself and for my child. The hospital corridor seemed endless as I waddled towards the maternity ward, one hand on my swollen belly, the other clutching my overnight bag. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and longing for in equal measure. As I approached the nurse's station, a familiar voice called out, "Molly!" I turned to see Nathan rushing towards me, his face a mix of concern and excitement. Behind him, Abigail waddled along, her own pregnancy now in its final stages. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice tight with pain and emotion. Nathan reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I know I don't have the right," he said, "but I couldn't miss this." It's our child, Molly. Before I could respond, a contraction hit me hard. I doubled over, gasping. She needs help, Abigail called out, and suddenly I was surrounded by nurses, being ushered into a delivery room. The next few hours passed in a blur of pain, sweat, and determination. Through it all, Nathan stayed by my side, holding my hand, whispering encouragement. Despite everything, I found myself grateful for his presence. Finally, with one last push, our daughter entered the world. As her cries filled the room, I felt a love so fierce it took my breath away. She's beautiful, Nathan whispered, tears streaming down his face. As the nurses cleaned her up, a doctor approached us, his face serious. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, we need to run some tests. Given your family history, reality came crashing back. The genetic disorder. The reason for all the secrecy and pain. Do whatever you need to do, I said firmly. The wait was excruciating. Nathan paced the room while I cradled our daughter, memorizing every perfect feature. Finally, the doctor returned. I have good news, he said, smiling. Your daughter is perfectly healthy, no signs of the genetic disorder. Relief washed over me, so powerful I thought I might faint. Nathan collapsed into a chair, sobbing with joy. Just then a commotion erupted in the hallway. Abigail's voice, filled with panic, carried into the room. Something's wrong. The baby. Nathan's head snapped up, torn between staying with us and going to his sister. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the same one that had torn our marriage apart. In that moment, looking down at our healthy daughter, I made a decision. Go, I said softly. She needs you. Nathan hesitated. Molly, It's okay, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. We'll be here when you get back. As Nathan rushed out, I held our daughter close, marveling at the twist of fate. After everything we'd been through, she was the one untouched by the family's dark legacy. Hours passed. I dozed fitfully, waking to every little sound. Finally, Nathan returned, his face etched with grief. Abigail's baby, he began, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, I whispered, meaning it despite everything. Nathan looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. Molly, I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try again, to be the husband and father you both deserve. I gazed down at our sleeping daughter, then back at Nathan. The anger and hurt were still there, but alongside them was something else. Understanding, compassion, maybe even the seeds of forgiveness. I can't promise anything, I said slowly, but for her sake, I'm willing to try, to find a way forward together. Nathan nodded, tears in his eyes. That's all I ask. As the sun rose on a new day, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, but looking at our daughter, I knew we had a reason to try. Whatever came next, we would face it as a family. Not the perfect, unblemished family I'd once dreamed of, but a real one. Flawed, complicated, but bound together by love and the promise of a new beginning. As I drifted off to sleep, our daughter nestled safely in my arms and Nathan keeping watch nearby, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful things can grow from the most broken places. And that perhaps was the greatest lesson of all.